go off topic and just kind of go off into another realm, but that's what we're here for. Let's pray before we get started. Father, we just thank you so much for this beautiful day that we have outside, and that we have these wonderful facilities that we can come together and gather as friends, brothers, and family. Lord, I just pray that your presence will be here even as we just talk shop. Lord, that we can learn so much more, not only about each other and about our vehicles, but learn more about you and how we can apply our relationship with you into our work and into our passions, into our hobbies, whatever it may be. So Lord, I just thank you, and I just pray you be with us today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Hey guys. My name is Pastor Wes. Up on the screen here, if you want to take a picture of that, I give you an opportunity to where if you do have a weird car question, or if you just need a little bit of advice, my name, my number, my email is all up there. And if you do email me or message me, just note North Dakota Men's Ministry. As you can imagine, I do get a lot of soliciting calls, weird calls every single day, all day. I think I hang up the phone more times than I talk on the phone. But as long as you know that you're North Dakota Men's Ministry, then I will give you the time, or at least some time. But I'll give you the time to talk, to chat, because I think it's always good when people take the time to do the work on their own vehicles, to do the work on their own home. I love doing work at my home, remodeling, doing whatever it is. I tell my wife time and time again, I could screw it up 3 times and it's still going to be cheaper than hiring someone to do it. And then I will know how to do it in the future. So we've gone through many remodel projects in the house and a lot of projects with cars and stuff like that without having to take it to the dealer or stuff like that. I like to learn and do it myself. Even, the best teacher I had in my life was experience. I made a lot of mistakes, but as long as you don't repeat those mistakes, you learn from those mistakes, that's where it's a gain, So I think one of the definitions of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. As long as we learn from those mistakes, and Lord, I've made a lot of mistakes. I'll tell you one mistake here that I made when I was pretty green behind the hills is that I had this 60s convertible Ford Galaxy 500, big old boat of a car. And what we were doing, I was doing a radiator hose or 2 on it, flushing the cooling system. And I remember my boss saying, the customer said sometimes it likes to jump out of park in reverse, okay? And I had gone through the whole job, nothing happened, didn't really think about it. I was still pretty young, so, boss says something, you listen half the time. I was just about done with the project, revving it up a little bit to get the, cooling system burped out. All of a sudden, clunk, door's wide open, goes into reverse, backs up out of the garage, hits the other hoist and bends the door straight forward. We had to get a door for this customer, and it was an embarrassing call to tell them that this had happened. We had to get a door from New Hampshire for this car, shipped in, and the body man had to put it back on. So that was a learning experience. When a customer says it likes to jump out of park, you put some wheel chocks under it and you listen. So those are just some of the many stupid experiences I've had. This is my business here in Valley City. It started out as it's been in Texaco since 1932. It was facing a different direction, different building, different structure, same lot. But in 1962, they turned it into a Texaco station with the footprint that it has now, and in 1979, turned it into a mobile station, same footprint and everything, and that is the gas pumps you see out there. A lot of people like those round stainless steel gas pumps. Almost every mechanic that works on gas pumps comes in and they say, what do you want for these pumps? I said, they're priceless because they're the only ones I could still work on. They're very reliable, very easy to work on, so I don't want to get rid of them. They still are more reliable than the other pumps that I bought just 10 years ago. It's just something to say older stuff is a lot better product because they knew how to build them back then. This is my shop, 3 bays inside, just a little bit of a showroom and a little bit of a waiting area. Not too big on the convenience, don't sell the cigarettes or nothing like that. We're right across from the high school, so I don't need the headache or anything like that. I'm also a student ministries pastor in Valley City. Can everyone hear me okay? I've been called a loudmouth many times. I kind of take that as a compliment. I'm a student ministries pastor part-time in Valley City. I've been at this shop here for just about 30 years. My wife and I have owned it for 14 now. And I also drive school bus. So I keep myself just a little bit busy, but this is where I've spent over half of my life stomping on this concrete piece of land right here. So that's the slideshow. I want to kind of just introduce you to a couple of free resources that are available if you do like to work on your own vehicles, and I hope some of you do. We have AutoZone has free wiring diagrams and stuff like that to where you can gain access to on their website. I think all you have to do is register your name, and there's tons of free resources there. Scan tools, if you need a scan tool or something like that to get that pesky engine light off, O'Reilly's usually does scan them for free. They'll even print it out. They'll try and tell you what you need, but I would recommend you search it on the internet or YouTube or something like that, or bring it to your mechanic and check it out and see what it actually does need. And then also, YouTube is a very good resource. I still use YouTube to this day. Sometimes there are people out there that know shortcuts, easier ways to do things. Just the other day, I was doing what was supposed to be a 3-hour job. I checked and seen what some other mechanics did. There's one little tweak, turned it into an hour or less job. Saved me a lot of time, a lot of headache, especially since it was the third alternator I had to put in 5,000 miles. So I wanted to save a little bit of time on that one. So, is there anyone that works at a dealership here? Okay, very good. What kind of dealership you work at?
Ford.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, the work's always there.
Yeah, the work is always there. You're right. That's right. I never did work. The guy I worked with and worked under for many years. I didn't work off commission. I was straight hourly, and I can't imagine how. I've heard the demand at dealerships is pretty high. You want to get the car count. You want to get as much product pushed as you can. I wasn't brought up that way, and so I don't have anything against dealership workers, but some of like service managers, stuff like that, I have a problem with because the honesty and integrity isn't always there. I've dealt with it myself. When someone comes to my business, it's me. If something happens, even if it's my mechanic, they're looking at me. I'm the one that has to be responsible for it. So honesty and integrity are high on our list of priorities. So there's a lot of times that I'm doing jobs for the second, third time for nothing, just because I want to keep that reputation. I want them to tell their friends, because it's a small town, North Dakota. Everyone talks to everyone. You make one mistake, everyone's going to know, especially with Facebook and stuff like that. So, but if you are looking for a mechanic, I encourage you to find that local hometown guy that you can build a relationship, that you can talk to, that you could probably invite to church someday. No offense, I'm not saying that don't go and find your dealer. I want them to find you, not the dealership. I want them to find you and not the service manager, because you're the one that keeps the business going. It's not the service manager or the owner or the manager. It's the mechanic, and it's a pretty overwhelming yet under-recognized position. Which tool out of all the tools I use in my workshop do you think I use the most? Any guesses?
Half-inch.
Okay, half-inch. Anyone else?
Torque wrench.
Torque wrench. The elusive 10 millimeter, right? No. Where you have emergency 10 millimeters. No, I tell you what, the most important tool I have on me. I don't have it on me now, so I feel like a hypocrite, but it's charging at my shop with my flashlight. My flashlight is the biggest tool that I use every single day. I pull that thing out tens to dozens of times. One, because I'm getting older, my eyesight isn't the best, but most of the things you're looking for are in some pretty tight and dark spots inside of your car. So I encourage you to get a good flashlight. That's going to save you a lot of time, save you a lot of trouble. If you just kind of look in the general area and think, oh, I know what that is, without really looking with a good light or a mirror, then you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. I'm not a salesman. I know what cars I see in the shop, and I know what cars I don't see in the shop. So if you have any questions about as far as, we're gonna open this up for Q&A here pretty quick. I don't want to ramble, so I know what cars that I don't see in the shop. One car I don't like seeing in my shop is BMW. I refuse to even let them in my shop. I had a bad experience once with a mechanic. He accidentally pulled the transmission plug and not the oil drain plug, and then overfilled the oil and then emptied the transmission. The customer got to the end of the block. I ended up having to have it towed to Minneapolis because that was the only shop that would touch it when I said the word transmission. So we had to have it towed down there. Insurance was, insurance came into it and all that. But because I took care of it for him, because I didn't try and push it out to someone else, he still comes to my shop to this day because I know I'm gonna take care of it. And so I encourage you to find someone that's gonna take care of you. Someone that's gonna, you're gonna be able to call a friend. So it's always good to have a mechanic friend, I tell you what. Sometimes I think that's why my wife married me, is because I was a mechanic, and I'm good in the kitchen too, so. But I'm not a salesman, but I can tell you a few cars that I wouldn't want you to buy, and a couple that I would probably recommend buying. Make sure you budget for your car. It's always gonna need something. Guess what, your tires don't get more tread on them as you drive them. They're gonna need to be replaced. Your brakes don't magically reappear. You're gonna need to budget for this stuff. It just baffles my mind when people come in and they're surprised that they need to do work to their car. I'm like, oh, how am I gonna afford this? I can't do this. I can't put $200 into brakes. Well, brakes wear out. Oil needs changing. So make sure that you're budgeting for that as well. Okay, any questions that you may have for me? I want to just open up time for dialogue. I have a resource called Identifix through Direct Hit that I use. So if you have any specific car questions, engine codes, stuff like that, we can probably try and just troubleshoot right here. Maybe we can help you out with something. So, yes.
What do you find as a mechanic, rebuild versus new, you're putting, because rebuild, of course, they warranty it, but then you got all your time in it, whether you got to replace one at a time or two or whatever. What's your feelings on rebuild parts versus new parts, your feelings?
And that goes back to that alternator that I had to do twice this week alone. It was a local parts store that starts with an O. I don't know if it's run by Riley or something, I'm not sure, but I put a reman in. It worked for, a couple thousand miles, 4,000 miles. Came in last week, and it happens to be my daughter's car too, so I felt so bad. She had both the grandkids, 20 below, and so I just felt so bad. I put another alternator in, worked for 2 days. It charged when it left. It was not charging when it came in. It was charging fine when it left. It was 14 volts, just fine. Yesterday comes in, the day before, right before, I was trying to get ready to come up here and all that. It goes out again. So I call up the dealer. I call up Perkins, or not Perkins, Pucklick, get the GM alternator, which was actually just as expensive, and it was a new alternator, and it was recommended to do it that way. As I look on Identifix, it says put the OEM part in, the aftermarkets just don't have the right circuits to them or whatnot. A lot of those aftermarket parts you rebuild. Some of them they'll just rebuild what's wrong and put it back in the box. Clean it up, put it back in the box. They won't rebuild everything. So I prefer new, especially with axle shafts. The price difference is only like $10. Alternators, sometimes it's quite a bit. Starters, I prefer doing new. It does come with a lifetime warranty. Well, if you're going to replace it 10 times, how good is that warranty then if you would have got a quality part the first time? There's no one out there really that's rebuilding anymore. I wasn't brought up rebuilding. I was just on the edge of that, to where when I started, there were rebuild kits in the shop, and the older guys knew how to do that, but it was easier just to call up a parts store and get a rebuilt one. It was cheaper, took less time. And the one electronics rebuild shop that we had went out of business a few years ago. We just got too old, and had to sell out. So no one is doing it anymore, so you're forced to go with the aftermarket or new parts. So yes, to answer your question in a very long way, new is the way I would go for most things. There are, exceptions to where rebuild or used, oh, that's another one too. Carpart.com is a great resource to find used parts, not only in this area, but also in the nation. They'll give you pricing right there, they'll give you where it is. If you search location from where you're at to spread out, it'll show you what's closest to you. It'll even tell you what condition it is. A lot of times it'll tell you how many miles are on that vehicle. So carpart.com, a wonderful resource. I use it all the time, especially for those hard to find parts. You know, I'm not going to buy a new window. I'm going to get a piece of glass from a salvage yard. I'm not going to buy, a new trunk lid. I'm going to get something from a salvage yard. So that's a good resource to use as well. I encourage you to check it out. Even engines, transmissions, stuff like that, they'll put right on there how many miles we're on it. So, yeah, good question. Any, yes?
I'd love to hear from you, what vehicles are the most in your shop? That's really interesting.
Okay, so, now I kind of back off. I don't do a lot of heavy work. I don't do engines, transmissions, rebuilds, stuff like that. The most I'll do is I'll go into an intake and switch out, like an oil filter housing on a stupid Jeep or something like that. I don't even like doing those because I'll come back in 1 year. That's about as far as I'll go. Starters, alternators, tires, batteries, brakes, maybe a differential if it's just a whole assembly used or something like that, but I don't rebuild. The most I see in the shop it's going to be a Ford. Next is going to be Dodge or Jeep, and your Chevys. Toyota is the least I see in the shop, especially the pre-2015 Toyotas. Very, very reliable vehicles. I was looking to buy a Toyota for my wife because our grandkids we've outgrown our vehicle with our grandkids, so we need to get a little bigger one. And I was looking at the different ones, and my friend has had a Toyota Sequoia and a Tundra for 13 years, got almost 300,000 miles on the thing, and both of them, and all they needed is tires and brakes. Oil changes very regularly, very solid vehicles, interior, exterior, under the hood, everywhere, all around them is very solid and reliable. But if you get into 2020 and over, to where they're trying to put these smaller engines in, the 3.5, stuff like that, EcoBoost, EcoBoost is one of those that I have to send off. I can't even begin to get into them because all the special tools you need, all the time it takes, cam phasers, stuff like that, even spark plugs on the Tritons. Tried it once. I won't do it again. It broke off. I had to tow it to the Ford dealership. Some of them you have to pull the cab just to get into some of those because then you got to retap and thread those cylinder walls or the cylinder holes. So I'm like, I'm not even going to get into it because it's not worth my time or liability or my reputation. I'm going to tell them, hey, they have a pretty high fault rating, so don't be surprised if they have to put 8 to 10 hours of labor into a spark plug job because they put a poor design spark plug into what used to be a pretty solid engine. So Toyotas are really solid until you get 2020. And then my friend said he went to the Toyota dealership because he finally had an issue at 300,000 miles with a computer. And I don't flash computers, I don't rescan, I don't reprogram them, nothing like that. I don't have $20,000 to spend on programming tools. So he brought it there. It was what I said it was. It just needed to reprogram the computer. They tried to sell him $10,000 worth of work in excess. He texts me and he says, "What about this?" I'm like, "You're fine. Just do the computer. We'll check the rest out, and I can do it for much less." And it didn't need the other stuff. But anyways, he said they have a whole wall full of crate engines ready to go in vehicles that are in line to put them in because they had a glitch at the factory and debris was getting into the oil pans and it was going into the engines and destroying brand new engines. So now I don't trust them. I'll stick to the Toyota's had a nice 5.7 liter V8 that has been very, very solid in the Tundras and Sequoias. So I would say up till 2019 is a good year to buy Toyotas. Cars, they're tanks. The bodies may fall apart around them, but the engine and transmission will keep on going. So, good question, thank you.
Remember those Toyota, those little small trucks, those 4x4 trucks, and they're like invincible?
the Tacomas and stuff like that, or the.
Yeah, they're like a pickup truck.
Yeah,
Tiny
those-
pickup truck.
A buddy of mine had one of those, and seriously, he had been smashed from every direction you can be, but he was still driving the thing through anything you could. The four-wheel drive system in those were just tanks. They're tanks. It's almost like an old 78 GMC. I mean, it'll go through anything that you can put it up to. So yeah, those were the good trucks. Once they got into the Tacomas, they tried to stick that V6 engine in there, and it just, newer V6, and I didn't like it very much, but the older ones, those were really nice. Even the small little, tiny Toyota pickups, were fun too, little four-cylinders, or diesel, if you put diesel in those things, those are fun too. Yes, Lee?
Could you touch a little on upselling? People go into stores, buy a set of tires, they get a phone call, you need this, this, and this, and a lot of people don't know, whether you need it or not. So how could you advise your customers, they go into other shops? Your first advice would probably say, come to you. You
Well,
probably wouldn't upsell them these things.
I would say get a second opinion. Yeah, definitely. Especially like my buddy that was in the dealer.
And get a second opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I hate it when I have to say you have to take it to the dealer, because, you know, I even know the people that are in the shop, and I know a lot of them, but there's a lot of demand and pressure on them to get so many jobs in, or to do so much work, and they're not paid the way they should be paid in the shop at a dealership. So I feel really bad, but when you look around in like a town like Valley City, the other two shops that I wanna recommend, they're so good at what they do, you're booking a month and a half out, and a lot of people don't have time to wait a month and a half for their car to get fixed. So you have to go to the dealer. As far as upselling, always get a second opinion. Don't take their word for it like it's, like it's gold. I mean, just take it to someone else that, even if it's not your regular mechanic, just take it somewhere else and get their opinion as well. But I would recommend those mom and pop, the smaller the shop, the better you're gonna be treated most likely, is because their reputation lies a lot on word of mouth advertising. So, I don't advertise at all. Radio, paper, maybe Facebook a little bit, but not much, not as much as I used to. Mine's all word of mouth. It's all reputation. And right now I'm sick. When I get back on Tuesday, I'm booked out for the rest of the week. And so word of mouth integrity is number one. I'm the number one advertising in our business. Yes.
Can you talk about how my brother took his Sunflare to 5 different shops and then finally brought it to you and you fixed it right away?
Yeah, I wish I could take full credit for that, but it was only by the grace of God, and I'm not joking with you. It was only by the grace of God that I figured out what was wrong with his vehicle, because I was stumped too. I didn't know why the brakes would lock up after a almost seemingly random short amount of time. At first, it would run just fine, and then all of a sudden your brakes started easing in, and then all of a sudden you're stopped. You can't do anything, and your brakes are getting hot. And the piston behind the master cylinder, I can't remember if it had an adjustment or it was not the right one or not seated correctly, but when I took the master cylinder out for like the 3rd time, I hear this not like audible voice, Wesley, look at the piston. But I look behind there and I'm like, that's not right. And so I adjusted that, changed that. Just a little metal rod, probably about a $5 part, and adjusted that, and it's still running to this day, just fine. I can't take credit for that. I can't, because if they wouldn't have given me all the time they did to work on it, I probably wouldn't have seen it. But they gave me an enormous amount of time to work on it, a couple of weeks to just kind of try it out, and they towed it all the way from Drayton to me, or wherever. Well, no, I came up here to the camp and towed it back.
You did.
And sure enough, it was only by, I give the credit to the Holy Spirit guiding me to where that was, because that only happened one other time in my 30 years, that it was just the piston behind the master cylinder that had an adjustment screw on it, that over time it just slowly pushed a little more into that piston, into the master cylinder, and lock up the brakes. So I knew that question was coming up too. I'm surprised he didn't ask it himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I won't take credit for that.
A
Yes.
question about like battery chargers.
Mhm.
With this cold weather, we've got a vehicle that we haven't driven a lot, and the battery goes down. And so we pull the cord out, hook up the battery charger. What about a booster, one of those portable, have you ever?
Yeah, I have a couple booster boxes at my shop. They're very handy. I tend to pull that out more than I do my jumper cables now. You gotta get a good, I mean, you have $60 ones at Sam's Club, $80 ones here or there, but, when you're doing it as much as I do, I got an 850 crank amp, weighs about 100 pounds, and I hate lifting it, so I have my assistant lift it for me. But it works every single time. It's actually, one time I was driving my school bus up to Devil's Lake, and, when I started it up, I used that jumper box and it started, and when I got up here, the thing went into auto shutdown mode and shut down while I was inside, so I needed to use that. And a friend of mine was only a block away, and his jumper cables, and ended up getting it started, but you gotta get a good one.
Any recommendations on?
Well, I mean, you know, they're probably all made in the same factory in China, but, honestly, I am partial to the Napa ones. I'm a Napa Auto Care Center. They've treated me very well. Their prices are really, fair, especially, if you watch their sale ads, they'll, have some that are on sale. But I like the Napa ones, they're really reliable. What I do recommend though, if you have those vehicles that, especially new ones, and there's so many parasitic draws on vehicle now, you got so many computers, electronics, you got those people that leave their phone chargers plugged in, so it's got the little red light, and it's 30 below, and it's sat for 2 days, and then they get in and wonder why it's dead. Well, you're stressing that battery, even with that little red light. I recommend a battery maintainer. I have a battery maintainer on about half the things I have, because I don't drive them all the time, but when I wanna drive them, I wanna make sure, I wanna know they're gonna start. So like on my other school bus I had a maintainer on it. I would plug in the diesel heater and the maintainer at the same time, so I knew that it would start when I wanted it to start. Maintainer is a $20 part. You plug it in, you can have a little cord that's attached to that and your block heater, plug them in at the same time. It's gonna shut off when the battery is fully charged. It's gonna come back on when it's lost a little juice. You know it's gonna be charged. It's not gonna overcharge it. It's only an amp, amp and a half, 2 amp stops. So I recommend a battery maintainer. I really do. It is a good investment, especially in North Dakota when we're facing days like the last 2 weeks, where I put in more batteries in the last 2 weeks than I have in the last 6 months because of the cold. The cold kills the batteries more than the heat. Well, the heat kills them too, but you find out just how weak they are in the cold. So. Any other questions? Yes?
Say, what's your recommendation on synthetic oils over menus? I mean, not the oil stuff.
Yeah, that's a good question. Most oil you're gonna find now is this like synthetic blend. You'll have to do a little searching just to find a conventional oil now, because a lot of it's blended. Now what the percentage is, I don't know. In my opinion, when I get something, I switch it to synthetic. In my, we'll say my 78 GMC, I run synthetic. It hasn't leaked. It actually starts better in the cold. And you can see comparisons between, well, I'll say Mobil 1 because that's probably been around the longest that I can attest to. I know Royal Purple, stuff like that's been around too. But Mobil 1, it's stood the test of time. It will start better in the cold. I don't see any excess leakage because of its properties. So I would recommend it because you can get a little more engine life out of your engine oil changes. Just don't.
Okay, so what do
push
you
it.
run for it? What miles do you run before you change?
I hate it when it says 15,000 oil change or 10,000. Don't. In my opinion, and this is like, just because I'm a little overcautious and I have the resources to do it a little more often, I do 3,000 for a blend oil, 5 to 6 on a synthetic, just because you still got to get it in and have that time to be visually looking at your car every now and then. I mean, otherwise you're going to end up with an antifreeze leak that could have been avoided because it started as just a little weep or just a little dribble or power steering or transmission, whatever it may be. All those things need to be inspected. I say if you drive your vehicle regularly, it needs to be inspected every 3 months. And I tell my older customers, that drive maybe 150 miles a year, you know, at least have your oil changed once a year. I mean, if they're still driving, they can afford a $40 oil change, but it's in the long run to where we're catching a battery issue or a transmission leak or power steering. I've had more power steering problems this last week than anything else. The cold is tough on power steering. Power steering hoses, you got pumps, you know, everything is just going out on power steering because of the cold. It's a very high pressure system, and the hoses just aren't made like they used to. They're just quick. They crimp them, put them in a box. Crimp them, put them in a box. I'm doing some vehicles once a year like clockwork. Once it gets 20 below, here we go. I'm doing this warranty power steering hose again because it's, you know, they're failing. I got one to do on Tuesday when I get back. The Chevy Silverado pressure hose, because once it gets cold, the crimp there, it seeps through the rubber and it starts leaking. Now when it gets to be 20 degrees out, it's probably gonna stop and not leak, but he needs it now. So warranty out the hose again.
So what do you think about the synthetic on the older engines? I'm talking old stuff.
I wouldn't.
50s.
Well, that's a good question. Does anyone else have an opinion on that?
I do. I flatten cams with synthetic oil in old cars because they don't have zinc. The new oils do not have zinc, and those motors need zinc. The other thing I found out with synthetic oils is that it'll find a leak or make a leak anywhere with synthetics on the old stuff. So find a racing type oil or a zinc additive, and I'll never use synthetic oil again in an old motor because of those.
How old are you talking?
60s and 70s. And I would assume a 50s, Larry, you probably know, 50s probably the same. They need zinc.
Yeah, those were cast iron engines.
And you mean,
Nowadays they're half aluminum.
Synthetic will
Yeah.
clean up an engine,
Yeah.
so if you've got a seal that's getting old, the synthetic will go through, you can buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Kevin knows more about engines than I do. He's rebuilt his own, but you're right, you know, that's a good point, because, you know, the cast iron engines, they don't, they're not like the modern engines, but I would say, what I work on is gonna be like 78, 77 and newer on a regular basis. He's quite a bit older than I, so he works on a little bit more stuff like that. I like to give him a hard time. He's my boss, but right now we're witnesses, so. Good question. Thank you for asking that. And I always kind of get that. That is like the debate. What do you do? And that's a good point. You know, older engines were just made differently. And they're made to a different standard. So, yeah, you probably want to put as close to what, okay, so always try and put the closest to OEM as you can in your vehicle, okay? I'm not saying you gotta go and get the GM oil every single time you do it. I mean, Dexos approved means it's met the criteria for Dexos oil in your vehicle. You wanna try and stick to what OEM was. That's when you're gonna have the least amount of issues in the vehicle.
What's your thoughts on fuel additives?
I don't use too many. Like Seafoam is, it's not like the miracle cure.
Yeah.
Marvel Mystery Oil is probably the one I've used the most, just because it has a cool name, I guess. I don't know, and the cans are really cool. Does it make a difference? I really don't know. I can't prove that. Can they prove it? I don't know. I know in my diesels, I'll put additive in my fuel because I want it to gel up. But in fuel and gas, I will say one thing, when you're running like small engines, mowers, snow blowers, augers, stuff like that, run pure gasoline. Run the premium, no ethanol. It's maybe at 50 cents more a gallon, but it's gonna save you time. Because that same electrical rebuilder I had also did small engines and stuff, and he would come and fill up 60 gallons worth of gas cans a week, because he is getting these small engines in, and the ethanol and fuel had degraded the components inside. He's rebuilding them, and putting in the premium gas, no ethanol, and then recommending his customers, don't use ethanol. It's fine for a car. If you run a vehicle that says you can put E85 in it, if you wanna put E85 into it, stick to E85. Because your computer remembers the kind of fuel that you put in. There's been a couple of times that, I've had a customer, come in and they wanted to save a couple bucks on their fuel, and they've been running E10 for the longest time. They switched to E85, and their car runs like garbage. Check engine lights on. Well, you're messing with your computer. It learns the burn ratio. It learns that stuff, and it tells like, okay, well this should be E10. That's what we run. So I would say if you want to switch, slowly blend it off to a different ratio over time, or have your computer reset after you put it in. So it knows what it's burning, so otherwise it'll cause the engine light to come on and it won't burn properly, so.
You gotta be more than half tank, 3/4 tank, to switch from regular to E85.
Yeah, which is that blend, that blend theory there is that you're gonna shock your system, it's not gonna know how to burn. So, yeah, very good, thank you for that. Yeah, it's usually about once every few months I gotta reset someone's computer because they tried an E85 or even the E15 that's coming out and they run, nothing but premium for a while. Why would they do that? I don't know, but they wanted to save a couple bucks that time. Or maybe their wife went and filled it up and saw the cheap stuff and said, I wanna put the cheap stuff in here, so, yes.
There's a site on YouTube that it's really informative, it's called Project Farms, if you ever just punch it up, he does all kinds of comparison, he's not sponsored to anybody, but like if you wanna know like.
Really good one, I actually watched that too.
Yeah, Project Farms it's called, you get on YouTube, punch it up, and he'll compare like all kinds of things, like whether it's, diesel fuel conditioners, how the power service, and many other ones he'll compare, and he's not sponsored by anybody, he's independent, and he's very thorough, not a man, he's very good. Project Farms it's called.
I think I've probably seen that, because I've seen a couple where they'll compare different penetrants or lubricant sprays or stuff like that, what's actually gonna work, it's pretty enlightening to see as they video it, what actually does penetrate and what doesn't, so that's good. YouTube is a great resource. There is a ton of garbage on YouTube, but if you are very specific with what you're looking for, so when I use it, I will be very specific. I will put 2012 Chevy S10 power steering pump, and it'll come up with other guys, and I'll kind of look at the shortest videos, because the long ones, they tend to just like to talk a little more. Set it to twice speed and just kind of see what they're doing, what are they taking apart, what are they not taking apart, where are they maybe able to cut corners without cutting the quality to make it a quicker job. Because as a one-man shop, time is money, and you want to try and do the best quality job you can, but you also have 3 other people waiting to get something done at the same time, so your time is valuable, yes.
What have you found yourself, like diesel fuel conditioners, for anti-gelling, you use Howell, you use Power Source, you use something else, what do you use there?
I was just talking to a buddy of mine who's a Dodge guy, and he likes the power source. He swears by it. I use Howes, and I'll tell you what. We have a 44-seater diesel school bus that we use for our kids' ministries, and having put it's had the same tank of fuel in it since I bought it in October, but I put a bottle of Howes in it, and it has been starting and running just fine without having to blend it with number 1, without having to do anything to it, right up until Wednesday. And when it started right up, and then I finally had to fill it because eventually they do need fuel, but I was able to stretch out that tank just using it every Wednesday. From that long, just half a bottle of Howes. So.
One thing I've used Howell's too with power services, and that Project Farm that he found, and he did it all scientifically, you watch it, he'll do a comparison there, and what he found was that you use twice the dose that they recommend, that works very well, and that's what we do on the farm, and the best place to buy, the cheapest place that I found is you go to Menards, once in a while they'll have it on sale, you can save probably $35, $40 40%.
You're talking house?
No, power
House.
service.
Okay,
Or
yeah.
house, a lot of these things, that's a cheap place to buy it, if you wait until it comes on sale, you watch when it comes on sale and then go up, you know?
Yeah. So that's what I did, I went to Menards and they had a house on sale, about a case. And so I'm sitting on a bunch of it, but it's been it's proved itself to me. The Dodge friend of mine at church, it swears power service, he's run Cummins diesels, Dodge trucks for years and years and years. I don't like Dodge, well, I don't like Dodge, but I don't like diesel. I don't work on diesels. Dodge is something that you avoid, so that's the definition of it. I've heard that from a friend of mine. But I don't work on diesels. I wasn't taught to work on diesels, so as I'm working on my own school bus, I'm learning as I go. And me, I'm kind of like, I like to save money too, so housing's cheaper, it has a guarantee on the bottle. Well, sometimes that's only worth how much you really want to dive into getting that, getting back out of that guarantee, but it's been a good product for me.
One thing I found watching Project Farms is not necessarily the most expensive one, it's better, it might be the cheapest one that's the best. And he does scientific research, he's very good, thorough, and he'll tell you which one on his tests that proved out to be the best. Project Farms, it's a good thing to watch for all of us, you know?
That's good. Everyone hear that, what he's talking about? Yep, so if you're wondering there's so many choices out there nowadays for everything. I mean, even fuel, even oil. The oil aisle in some of these parts stores takes up a third of the store. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, it used to be oil is oil. You had Amoco or Pennzoil or Valvoline back in the day. I mean, you had the choices. That was it. Now it's what old engines, new engines, synthetic, blend, Ultimate Gold Royale, whatever it may be. Do your research. Check it out. We're just wrapping up. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, I spaced for a minute, maybe it was asked, generic brand oil, is that, stay away from that, like store label?
That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that. I tend to stay away. Well, you know what? Do your research, because I use Napa oil in my servicing Napa shop because Valvoline makes it. It's made in a Valvoline factory to Napa specifications, and it even says Ashland Incorporated on the bottle. So Ashland Incorporated is Valvoline oil. So do a little research. Find out where it's made. Just so you do kind of get a little, you don't want to put low quality oil in your vehicle. I mean, it's gotta last us. Yes.
I was gonna say, what's the one thing you would recommend people to absolutely not to try to fix by themselves? Like either take it to the dealership or have an absolute professional handle it. What would you not recommend anyone try on their own?
Okay, electrical work, like computers, stuff like that, you almost have to take it to the dealer. I've even tried just taking used computers from another one, putting it into the other one, identical years, everything, still gonna be programmed. So now you have to pull it to the dealer, rather than being able to drive it up. Been there, done that. What would be the other? Heater cores. Heater cores are always a challenge unless they're older. They're a little easier to get to, but even then, they're half glued in there with sealants and stuff, so it'll be pretty stuck in there. But heater cores, steering columns, I learned that the hard way. Tried to rebuild the steering column in my front driveway, and it ended up it was cheaper and easier just to replace the steering column with a used one. So it's one of those components to where, used ones work just fine until you get into the newer ones that have the chips in them, and then you gotta have the chip reprogrammed or bypass it with a diode. I mean, electronics is a pain in the butt. I don't know why they put in plastic and all that, but anyways.
They must not, when I was a kid, that was a real common thing, heater cores would go out and you get anti-freeze, your window shield and stuff, but I just don't see it in the vehicles much anymore. Do you see that too? They must have improved it, huh?
They are. It's not very often I'm diagnosing a heater core anymore. And really, you see it from those that are very poorly maintained. They may have gotten oil in the antifreeze at some point. Well, oil, it's going to degrade things. So you want to make sure to keep your antifreeze clean and stuff like that. So.
Can I ask one other question? You used to run a toll business, or you for John, you told.
Yeah.
What's your craziest highway story of tolling someone?
It wasn't even on the highway. I was in town, and I was pretty rookie at it. and I was hauling a vehicle from just a few blocks away, and I didn't have the steering wheel locked. So when I started going down the road, it just kind of slowly started creeping sideways as I'm driving, and I'm like, what is going on? I couldn't figure it out. So then I turned around and hooked it from the other direction. It's still doing it, and so I figured out nowadays people will just take the seatbelt and wrap it around the steering wheel, and then fasten it to keep that wheel straight. That was a great tip. I wish I would have learned a long time
I
ago.
heard about a guy one time that parked a vehicle and didn't engage the parking brake and it rolled down a hill. Have you ever heard of that happen?
Only by the grace of God did his vehicle not hurt someone or get badly damaged. But yeah, it was even like from a church parking lot, and it went down and it landed in a gas station without any real damage.
Yeah, amazing.
Uh,
That was my vehicle.
God is great in some of the weirdest ways we don't even think about.
That was my truck.
That was his truck,
Rolled
yeah.
down the hill,
And rolled right
through the
down.
gas station, hit a parked car, and the next morning I come out to my vehicle, we had prayer Tuesday mornings, I come out after prayer, and Wes's grandpa had built this little wooden block and put it under my tires.
And mind you, it was a Ford. I'll blame it on the Ford.
That's true.
It was a Ford Ranger. So, any other questions? Don't be afraid to come up and chat with me. If you got a vehicle that you're stumped on and want a little extra diagnosis, just I'll try and do what I can. I like to see people working on their own stuff. So, I encourage it. To be honest with you, there's nothing more rewarding as a man to be able to repair your own stuff. I tell you what. It's good for you to be able to fix your own stuff. There's so many things nowadays. It's like a throw away and buy new one, and I don't like that. Yes.
I was gonna say, I can testify, the first time I did one better, I was very skittish, because I was like, I didn't know, how easy or not easy it was to get electrocuted. Because I've seen some people like, yeah, as long as you're clean or nothing, he's something grab both posts, like, it's fine. I was like, I'm still not gonna test it myself, but hey, I had a 2019 Volkswagen Jetta S, loved that car, changed it out. I actually got a 2021 Jeep Compass because it's four-wheel, and because it keep getting stuck in the snow, where it's kind of lower it keep getting stuck. I changed out the battery. Everything was hunky-dory. I was like, wow, I'm feeling great. Made sure everything was good. But I was taking the last crank and accidentally touched the positive, and it like stuck and welded. And I stepped back because I saw sparks, and I watched the socket on the front just start glowing red. So I smacked it. I was like, okay, everything's fine. All of a sudden, here, and smoke starts coming out of the engine bay. And I look down in there, I hear like a sizzling and a hissing. I reached down and grabbed and smacked the thing out of it because it started burning. And I was like, okay, everything's fine. I turned on the car, and a million errors. I was like,
Yeah.
So I sit there and looked it up on Reddit. It's like, oh yeah, what they're gonna try and tell you is that you need to go and reset your computer or battery for it. All you're gonna do is just set it into accessory mode, hold down the brake, go all the way to the left 3 seconds, all the way right, reset it just fine. Drove that thing to Fargo and back, and I noticed that it started getting low. I was like, why is it struggling to start? So I take the battery out, and it had burned a hole through the battery, and it was just slowly leaking. There was acid everywhere. I took a toothbrush and vinegar. But once I got that new one, I was like, man, I know how to do it now. It was a great time. I got a photo of just the battery, just a hole burnt through it. I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
It's a great time.
If you're jump starting, make sure you hook it up the right way. I was working at the shop, and I was jump starting my dad's truck, and for some reason the cables got hooked up the wrong way, and that battery flew 25 feet up in the air. Thankfully, it was my dad's. He was a little more forgiving than anyone else, but still, it's embarrassing. But you learn from those mistakes. You take the extra time to make sure the pluses match up and the minuses match up. Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, I think they're serving lunch here in just a few minutes. So if you have any other questions, don't feel free to find me and we'll chat. Okay, thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Okay.